Hello, dear Fox News, Maria Bartomo and Devin Nunes. There, you guys are going to make mistakes leaving out former director of the FBI Robert Luskin and FBI directors that came before him, and their roles with writing forensics since I was a kid. They are increasingly at countries A through Z collusions with crime scenes and with the people. Forgiveness is so we allow someone to demonstrate roles with the breaching method that is also being and having been replaced right from the communications of James Madison and of the founders behind him and his plan. That which actually really caused more than anything else the Declaration of Independence, the Constitutional Convention, and the Civil War. So we have our founders' communications replaced. They had to have this declassified after their lives because of the breaching method was still entrenched. We were supposed to answer this. It was declassified. That's why slavery was left entrenched, northern colonies and southern colonies sickly distinctly. And there had been more than 13 colonies before America's founders were even born. They were using James Madison's plan to just do damage control, force people to have to break the laws of the internationally monitored conversations and collusions with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and terrorists, and nature demonstrations of that causing all kinds of negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures too. Those had all only been remembered, used to blame on other things, others ourselves, and to stay those collusions, to stay people increasingly incapable of affording the discernment of the human fact-achieving nature breaching method as a scientific value also demonstrated to us by nature itself, it being one of the things true always, that slavery was value as, that breaching method against Native Americans, what before Columbus even sailed the ocean blue, was about. It had already been about changing and faking, forcing, tricking, hurting, and persuading names A through Z before that of the human species body. A breaching method, it is more probable to theorize, let alone to convict. It recognized how only locations, areas, and states could operate the phenomenon of names of countries. And then that too would be forced, and they have to have leaders. Leaders too, though, they would have to rely upon locations, areas, and states, fact-achieving nature, quality, aspects of nature. In other words, if they force, trick, hurt, and persuaded locations, areas, and states to defend their names as countries wrongly against others who were innocent, and then to have those innocent people counter that correctly, but leaving out the breaching method too, its roles with it, and defending that, not realizing that more and more they would not be able to defend anyone with short words proper by the identity the scientists shared. That one that has them not sharing an identity, appearing to not share an identity, where it's showing us simultaneously how it is hyper additional nature. Only the extent of this is debatable. See, but we have people getting away with pretending things are debatable that are not. Like how we have black people as whites of eyes and as evidence alone to discern how witch trials are about how three branches of government, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, the difference of their guilt, the insidiousness of people A through Z that came through their campuses and exceptions, and imposed upon about how countries A through Z were in our shared here since before computers. I mean, since before our founders were born, since before cars, and the suburbs, their homes still standing, designed for that torture, extortion, by that torture, extortion, fact-achieving nature slavery method, that has the audacity to blame motivations like money for what caused slavery. using those truths. Because when you're forced slave, in other words, using those truths for lies, forcing that respected on a mass scale. No, FBI has roles with Connecticut's Channel 3 News and next to them with foreign and domestic intelligence and military. Russians and Ukraine, same ones are next to Fox Connecticut News, involved with co-defendants of former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and their family members, involved with police that attach me to fake conversations with themselves as family members, and people tied to them with the Wethersfield Police Department, also at intercities locations next to the news locations, like Fox Connecticut News. There's a Charlie Bose. I never had a word of conversation with him in my life. He's involved with Eric Mendez. They try to film him next to me. There are proofs at Food Bag. And that as people that have been planting evidences with intelligence associated with Food Bag in locations next to it, and which is the Wethersfield Police Department, since before it was moved there, with people with other natures of conjunctions to where the Wethersfield Police Department used to be. Increasingly involved with planting evidences, identity theft, fraud, slanders against me on my street, with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, judges, prosecutors, their family members. Increasingly timed collusions with overt criminal enterprises, private ones. On a mass scale, the intelligence community has crime methods where they report fake recorded things, and they have people say things then after they said other, and then they ask people, well, why didn't you say? They go back and forth when they ask questions. They can't afford a detailed answer. In other words, on a mass scale, what's actually recorded are people are asking questions and just faking that by timing where people are going to be, and they don't even answer. They'll just put some fake answer, and they can't afford how they've been doing that to be discerned, because it shows that all natures of investigations and of investigators are being and have been used remotely, criminally foreign influence / hyper-criminally foreign influence, not just criminally foreign influence. The northern colonies and the southern colonies, they were both criminally foreign influenced roles with slavery, sickly distinctly, not sickly non-distinctly, but they were also sickly distinctly criminally foreign influenced. So in other words, there's another nature of criminal foreign influences to appreciate. And there are proofs that it was entrenched as a human fact-treating nature breaching method forced on countries A through Z. And then the names of the people of the sciences A through Z, forced on them to be collusions with itself from off those locations. And there are proofs that the Campus Martius does not function properly without exceptions in exception nature. That pantheism scientific method shows up too, is inseparable from proper appreciation of the Campus's Martius as a function to be led by the hyper-invisible but still discernible. For example, not the slightest detail left out, black pupils, let alone just details, finite, grouped, and simultaneous, / hyper-simultaneous, overtly, / insidiously, as we could discern. We are a human species body of individual bodies with all group differences generated by that which is generating the other species bodies too, so we can discern its hyper-invisible but still discernible body. It is a hyper-invisible but still discernible hyper-conjunction to all parts of English grammar and of other languages' grammars. The parts of speech are about the invisible but still discernible. Why and how we need more than one name for a verb is simultaneously, as all things simultaneously are, about the hyper-simultaneous, about the hyper-invisible but still discernible. Why and how we need to appreciate more than one word for verb, regardless if we're using it in a sentence or not. How and why the rules of grammar are manifest the way they are. This is about hypercorrelation. This is about a method that cannot and will not leave out the smallest finite detail, black pupils, who disbelieves The only fake integrity spoke because of a certain type of victim / hyper victim that you guys had came through campuses A through Z. The best ones, the worst ones, and the difference of that used by the breaching method. Everything it uses is through ourselves. So it had ourselves use that self-value. How it reassigned what nature communicates with black people's whites of eyes. How it reassigned and stayed forced reassigned from what nature communicates, but our founders too, even though they had it declassified, they still have measured and maintained self-valued roles with readings of American history that are simultaneously criminally foreign influenced / hyper-criminally foreign influenced. I'm not even a lawyer. And tactically delusions raw, thank God, because lawyers in all sides of criminal and civil cases and the courts themselves originally and still, as the names of the people of the sciences and exceptions, they have collusions. And while natures of differences, you guys are fact cheap nature, quality aspect in nature, and the nature of the debate itself is as criminal insidiousness / hyper criminal insidiousness. I'm not a police firm, I'm not identity of law, but nature shows us we need to discern a distinct identity of criminal foreign influences, where and how sickly distinctly the North and South had roles with slavery. After and while, as roles with the breaching method, as the same breaching method, sickly distinctly, but non-distinctly too, to keep that not discerned against Native Americans, themselves against themselves. We're supposed to appreciate that first. See, they have the parts of our, that's how they have self-value rules with sequence shifts, with appreciation of American history, how they get away with pretending things that are debatable that are not. In other words, you guys would debate black people's rights of eyes. No, in other words, this was sustained against Native Americans as the breaching had been sustained against countries A through Z, therefore names A through Z, as locations, areas, and states everywhere the human species body has an individual body. Science shows us that it is more probable to theorize, let alone to convey, that both the messengers of the Old Testament and of the Quran, they are partially about how a hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise from off campuses and exceptions to it that it worked with too could be to be and stay led by the hyper-invisible but still discernible. Again, for example, not leaving out the smallest finite detail, or we sense. We're supposed to sense any court that's entertaining all kinds of things. Going back and forth with integrity and postures of integrity of calmness or integrity of aggression. They're leaving out what came first. They have roles with predicate acts with facts methods. What's actually recorded are the prisons tied to the courts and the judicial branch offices and the corrections offices. They are maintaining collusion / S, not just with all natures of crime scenes and next to it, and not just with all sides of criminal and civil cases at the same time, and the courts' names and the police forms, their sources, overt criminal enterprise, even when, and private ones and terrorists, even when they're not in the cases. See everyone all of a sudden using the words like extremism, trying to give examples of integrity to their logic, quoting principles of reason that if you observe can't be defended. The way nature shows us principles as it with identity of relativity, hyper-relativity to itself, which we could ignore its hyper-native system. It's projecting to us we have the same color eyes and different color eyes at the same time. For its identity to the extent we could discern, which comes with its equally with its complete identity of relationship to itself, and the only increasing value of that. But that value, the only increasing value of it is here, or it is forced from here, not as death, but regarding our quality of diffusion, where our identities as its own, we have relativity to positive and negative equally, but we are further our quality of diffusion, where and how it is making more and more of its identity of forever nature through us and or anything we make up, even art. It is inseparable from the finite, the order of the finite, the active, the order of what is active or grouped, and the progressive. But again, we are systems tactile from its own with definitions of progressive. When I say progressive, per its system, it is showing us the only increasing value of the seasons that are not even here yet, even if they never get here. And while it is showing that too, equally it is showing us an extent of its body, the hyper invisible but still discernible, and functional being, hyper invisible but still discernible distinctly from the invisible but still discernible. Again, this is what the rules of English grammar, the parts of English grammar, the parts of English, even the finite parts of the letters were revealed hyper relative to. There is a hyper conjunction to all parts of all things. This is not just what we are discerning when we discern why and how we need more than one name for a verb. Present participle, past participle, gerund, infinitive, a predicate. Predicate is a main verb. Note how the law has a phrase called predicate act. There are predicate acts with facts into databases per a method that everyone has collusions with as methods that it showed them to use. Increasingly, there are people with and as a gold family involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, and putting sequence shifts in databases with proven child abusers, leaders of kids years apart, involved with them with that. Federal evidences crimes with proven child abusers, leaders of kids years apart, and their rules with syntax regarding their religions and other people's and differences. These are some Black KKK, Latino theme, Confederate flag theme, Korean theme, Russian theme, Ukrainian theme, at the same time with their doctors and names next, with the businesses and houses next to Hartford Hospital. The same names involved with UConn's roles with Hartford Hospital. UConn's is in Storage, Connecticut. These same names next to on Zion Street in Hartford, Connecticut, next to Trinity College, and on the spots next to Trinity College, like in New Britain Avenue. Increasingly, people involved with identity theft, frauds, federal evidences crimes, and people from Wethersfield involved with that part in Hartford, and with New Britain.